Here's 30 or so minutes of useless information about Andor. A lot of these are Easter eggs you can see in Luthen's antique store. You'll see what I mean by that in a minute. But also details behind the scenes and a lot of references people might have missed. And if you know anything about Andor that I missed, please let me know in the comments. Hey everyone, it's Andrew.
Did you guys notice the blaster pistol Andor was using in the new TV series? This weapon is what's known as a Briar pistol, and OG Star Wars fans might remember this was actually the weapon used by Kyle Katarn way back in the old Star Wars games like Dark Forces, Jedi Knight, Jedi Academy, and it even makes an appearance in Empire at War. It's so cool to see this weapon brought back, and another thing you might not have noticed about it, Andor's adopted father, or whoever this guy is here in the flashback, is actually using it. So I'm assuming at some point this poor guy dies, hands his weapon onto Andor, and it becomes Andor's main weapon. You could also actually use this weapon in Star Wars Battlefront. It came with the Death Star expansion pack, and this was the first time it was brought back into Star Wars canon since Disney took over. This detail in Andor goes way back to a Star Wars video game from the 1990s. So in the new Andor series, Andor says that his homeworld is Fest, even though it's actually Kenari. His records say it's Fest. Now, in terms of Star Wars canon, Fest is only new, first entering the canon in the 2017 short story by Whatever Sun. However, Fest was actually originally created for Star Wars Dark Forces, the 1995 first-person shooter. It was a snow planet you actually get to play through in the game. I don't see why it would be a different Fest in the new show, but it's really cool to see some of these old Star Wars planets being brought back into the canon in new ways as an homage to the past. I can't believe they just did this. I literally can't. Andor just did something I thought we would never hear or see in Star Wars. The first proper swear word was just dropped. The S-bomb.
Shit. We're under siege.
If that's not saying something about this show and the direction Disney are taking this, then I don't know what is. Man, who would have thought? There's one other time where I'm pretty sure Lando came very close to saying it, but was cut off. But this takes Star Wars to another level. It's a whole new thing. It's new territory, new ground, and definitely fits the tone of the show. But obviously, you might have noticed this show doesn't really have that classic Star Wars humor like we're used to, the goofiness. For example, if this was in The Mandalorian, Linus Mosk here would have potentially said something like Poodoo. I don't think Tony Gilroy is going to be happy with any character in the show saying Poodoo, though. He's going the real deal. Dropping S-bombs. We'll see if we get any more. I think this is probably going to be the only one, but man, it's happened, people. We need to talk about the guy eating blue noodles out of a takeaway container. A few things to take away from this. Get it? First of all, takeaway containers are clearly galactically universal. They have them in Star Wars. It's a takeaway container you get from a takeaway place. Amazing. Second of all, why are the noodles blue? Just because it's Star Wars doesn't mean the noodles have to be blue. He could be eating perfectly normal noodles, but of course, someone had to go in with some dye the noodles blue just to be like, hey, they're Star Wars noodles. Of course they're going to be different. Blue uniform, blue noodles. Why wouldn't they be blue? I love little details like this in Star Wars. Please give us more of this. And that's one thing this show is doing so well, is just making everyone, the extras, the world feel so real. Everything feels real, including the Blue Noodle Man. Respect, my friend. It's going to be the latest Star Wars meme. Did you guys notice this reference to Rogue One in Andor? Tim with 2 M's comes in and says,
"Are we bidding on the Wabani run tomorrow?"
What?
Do you guys know the planet Wabani? Does that sound familiar to you? Because this is actually where Jyn is being held at an Imperial labor camp at the start of Rogue One. You remember the dirty, scruffy-looking Stormtroopers? This is actually where she's rescued by K2SO and the other rebels. They come in and break her out on Wabani. Now, a little reference there. All the throwbacks to Rogue One, we're probably going to be getting a bunch more as the show goes on. Oh my gosh, Cassian Andor actually has a toy of a bantha, so he can also ride like a bantha. We see this in episode 2 when Marva goes into Cassian's room, and just before she picks up his staff stick thing from when he was a kid, we see the camera pan past this bantha sitting on the table. It's good to see these universes being connected. Book of Boba, all about the banthas, and now Andor also has some kind of love and affiliation with banthas. Hopefully played with this when he was a kid. If you had time to play, I don't know, he's been in this war since he was 6 years old, remember? But there it is. Bantha on the table, people. Boba would be proud. Apparently, Andor was originally going to be 5 seasons instead of just 2. The writer and director Tony Gilroy just did an interview with Rolling Stone, and it seems like he was originally brought on to do 5 seasons of Andor, which would be 5 years of Andor's life in the lead up to the events of Rogue One. The idea that this character is super complicated, the guy that sacrifices himself for the rebellion for a greater cause, has a very complicated past. I cannot believe they just put this back in Star Wars. In episode 4 of Andor, if you look closely in the background of Luthen's shop, you'll actually see Starkiller's armor from The Force Unleashed, also known as the Sith Stalker armor. And the reason this is controversial is because George Lucas notoriously hated Starkiller. He thought he was too overpowered, too much of an anomaly, and up until this point was no longer part of canon since Disney took over. That has now all changed though. Obviously, the armor hasn't been identified specifically and nowhere stated that it is in fact Starkiller's armor, and why would Luthen have this, of course, but it's very clear that's what it is. It's an Easter egg to The Force Unleashed. Back in the canon, people. The latest episode of Andor gave us a closer look at a sector of the Empire we've seen before, but never in this much detail. The Imperial Security Bureau, otherwise known as the ISB, which we've seen in Star Wars Rebels, in lots of other Star Wars media. This building is their headquarters on Coruscant, the ISB Central Office. And this first appeared in the Darth Vader 2017 novel, also made an appearance in the Battlefront 2 Inferno Squad novel, but finally we're actually seeing what it looks like on the inside. You'll also notice that the Imperial meeting room has quite a similar setup to those on the Death Star. A circular table with the Imperials all sitting around facing one another. Just got to bring in Darth Vader and get some force choking happening. In the Imperial Security Bureau meeting room, we get the mention of Avala 6.
Regret. What is this item from Avala 6?
Now, Avala might sound familiar to you. Avala 7 is the planet where the Mandalorian first met Grogu. It's where he went to retrieve him. It's a desert planet, also home to Quill. The Imperials mention there's mining happening on Avala 6. The Empire is mining for a lot of things at this time, building their army, building the Death Star. And as far as I know, they didn't make it to Avala 7, but interesting knowing they were this close to a planet we are all too familiar with. Did you guys notice the Mandalorian armor in Luthen's antique shop? No idea how he got a hold of this, seeing as though Mandalorians are so closely bound to their armor. It actually kind of looks like Jango Fett's chest plate. This, of course, is also there with the Sith Stalker armor, otherwise known as Starkiller's armor, although technically I guess it was the Emperor's and the Emperor gave it to Starkiller. I can't see the Emperor wearing this ever. But what I want to know is, how did Luthen get a hold of all this stuff? How does one acquire Mandalorian armor? Obviously, there are a lot of dead Mandalorians around the galaxy, especially after what happened on Mandalore, but this is also super rare. This dude would have to have, like, the best security at this place, because I feel like people could be breaking in here all the time, trying to get a hold of all this stuff, man. They have good security system, cameras all over the place. Simple references in Andor seem to set up events that happen later in the Star Wars timeline. Mon Mothma mentions the planet Ghorman, which we first saw way back in the 1990s Star Wars X-Wing and also Star Wars Rebellion. Mon Mothma talks about how the Empire is cutting off Ghorman's shipping routes, which means everyone on the planet is likely not going to have food and will starve.
We should find some Ghorman guests for tonight and see how amused they are. Your fun friends just cut off their shipping lanes yesterday.
And this will likely lead to the protests we know happen on Ghorman in the timeline, and then, unfortunately, a large-scale massacre when Stormtroopers gunned down protesters against the Empire on the planet. This is literally just a line from Mon Mothma. Whoever wrote this show has really gone deep, done their research, and brought in all these little Star Wars aspects from across the timeline. So towards the start of episode 4 of Andor, Luthen mentions Rakatan invaders. Is it Rakatan? Rakatan? I don't know.
Blue Kyber, Skystone, the ancient world, celebrates the uprising against the Rakatan invaders.
This is a reference that goes all the way back to the Knights of the Old Republic, the video game. The Rakata were an ancient amphibious humanoid species native to the planet Lehon, who at one point basically ruled the galaxy. The blue crystal that Luthen gives to Andor is actually a Kawati signet, which commemorates the Rakata's uprising. It contains a blue kyber crystal. So what happened to them? Why aren't they around anymore? Well, eventually they were corrupted by the dark side of the Force. Some people say they were the first to develop hyperspace travel, and initially they actually used the power of the Force to travel through hyperspace. Totally random that they're bringing this into it, bringing them back. So many weird deep cuts in the latest episode of Andor. I'm loving it. Oh my gosh, guys, no idea how he has these, but it looks like Luthen has a Sith and Jedi Holocron. They're sitting on the shelf in his back room. How would he get a hold of these, man? Sure, it could just be like a triangle and a cube, right? Like a pyramid prism thing and a cube, but how would he have these? I know they're kind of just dropping in heaps of references into this show, random stuff that you can see in the background that they're like, oh, this has great significance, but seriously, like, they need to justify this kind of thing. They can't just be dropping in random references. Oh yeah, by the way, Sith and Jedi Holocron. Because wouldn't people be after these? That's the thing. I feel like at some point a Sith Lord, a Jedi is going to show up and be like, hey, I need my holocron, man. What do you say? Did you know that episode 1 of Andor is actually the first time we ever saw the letters BBY on screen? This, of course, stands for Before the Battle of Yavin and was first created in the 1990s as part of Lucasfilm's publishing projects at the time to create a Star Wars timeline relative to the events of A New Hope. I had no idea that they'd never done this on screen before, though. Clearly not. And I'm assuming this is something we're going to be seeing in a lot more Star Wars media to kind of give context to when this is happening in the timeline. This is just another example of something Andor is doing that's groundbreaking for the Star Wars universe. A show for the fans that's not focused on fan service. How does that make sense? Do you guys remember the Utapauans? Dudes with the big teeth? The Grand Inquisitor is an Utapauan. Well, he should trade in his spinning lightsaber for one of these, an Utapauan monk cudgel. This is the first antique Luthen offers to Mon Mothma, and you could say it bears some sort of resemblance to the staff that's carried by Tion Medon. Although, as far as we know, his staff isn't used as a weapon, and this is. There's some similarities in the hilt design, the handle, and its metal appearance. If there's one species I want to see more of as well, it's the Utapauans. There's so many teeth. I love seeing the teeth. 10th level, thousands of battle droids. I feel like they'd be so much fun to play. Come on, man. Bring back the Utapauans, give them the monk cudgel. Guys, they brought blue milk back. Can you believe they literally put blue milk back in Star Wars, and they're even making it like a meme? Like, people in Star Wars can't just drink normal milk, oat milk, almond milk, soy milk, nothing. It's blue milk, people. And also blue/green cereal. For some random reason, the dude's eating Fruit Loops, but they're all green and blue. Have we ever seen cereal in Star Wars before? I think this is the first time we've actually seen real cereal become canon. It's part of the Star Wars canon now. It's part of the Star Wars universe. Cyril is eating his cereal. Can you believe it? Blue milk is back. Homage to A New Hope when Luke and Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen are all sitting around the breakfast table having some blue milk. Here we are. Like in Lego Star Wars, Luke is literally a blue milk addict. You cannot look at Luke without seeing him drink some blue milk. Here it is again, guys. They're still going with it. Blue milk is a thing. Of all the items in Luthen's antique store, this one might be the most important. Luthen has artifacts from all over the galaxy. The Utapauan cudgel, what looks like the Sith Stalker armor worn by Starkiller in the first Force Unleashed game, even a Jedi and Sith holocron. But this one here, I think, takes the cake. These stone tablets are actually the artworks of the Mortis gods, which we saw in Star Wars Rebels in the World Between Worlds. The Mortis gods also appeared in 3 episodes of Star Wars The Clone Wars, but they're probably more commonly known for the doorway that led Ezra to the World Between Worlds. How Luthen has these, I have no idea. And these are obviously artworks from a different time, because I'm pretty sure the events of Star Wars Rebels and Ezra opening the World Between Worlds are still several years away in the timeline. Hasn't happened yet. In Andor Episode 5, we get to see the daughter of Mon Mothma for the first time. Her name is Leda, and she was first mentioned way back in Star Wars Legends in the Dark Empire sourcebook from 1993, the Star Wars role-playing game. But this was only the first mention of Mon Mothma's daughter. Her name, Leda, actually comes from the 2002 reference book, The New Essential Guide to Characters. So how awesome is it that Andor is paying such attention to detail of the Star Wars legends and the old canon that they're going back and literally taking character names, random obscure characters, and bringing them into the canon, making sure it's accurate to what came before. From all the way back in 2002, 20 years ago, they're still getting Mon Mothma's daughter's name right. The amount of research that must have gone into creating this show, man, insane. There are lots of Easter eggs in Luthen's antique shop, but one in particular stood out to me that I was like, wait, he has one of those? It's literally the boom arm that I use for my microphone. It's the same one. It's a Rode boom arm. You can buy these things for like, I don't know, 80 bucks, 100 bucks. For the first time ever, we're seeing a boom arm in Star Wars. It's literally Luthen has the same boom arm that I'm using to record this video right now. My microphone is attached to that arm that he has in his office. What does he use it for? Is it like a light stand? It also looks like it's painted gray and the clip on the bottom is a bit different, but the arm itself, the frame is exactly the same. Never thought I'd see this in Star Wars. It could be a magnifying glass. Perhaps he's using it over the table to look more closely at objects. Luthen has lots of Easter eggs in his antique shop, but a new one that we've spotted this week are the Temple of Doom stones. known as the Shankara stones from the Temple of Doom, which of course belong in a museum. How awesome is it when Star Wars references Indiana Jones though? I love that these are both basically part of the same universe. Why does Luthen have them? It's awesome. Come on. This is on par with Lego Star Wars having the Indiana Jones hat in the original games. Here, Luthen has the stones on his shelf, just sitting there, just chilling next to some of the holocrons, some of the other stuff, random jars, things, bottles of goodness knows what on the left. They're all part of the same universe. There you go. Episode 6 of Andor includes another huge yet subtle reference to Rogue One. After being fatally injured, Namek still needs to navigate Andor through the eye, and in doing so, he shouts, "Climb! Climb!
Climb! Climb! Move! Climb! Now! Climb!
This is what K2SO also said to Andor in Rogue One just moments before his death, as he was dying.
Climb! Climb! You can still send the plans to the fleet.
So it turns out clone troopers have actually already made an appearance in Andor. We saw them in the trailer, but did you see them in Cyril's bedroom when he goes back to live with his mum for a little while? As he's looking at the hologram of Andor, you can actually see a couple of clone trooper action figures in the background. I wonder if these were ones made specifically for the show, or if they're actual Star Wars Disney toys that you can buy. I assume they are. Why would they go make clone troopers specifically for them when they already exist? I think it's hilarious, though, that he's got these here. I mean, anyone can collect toys, sure, but I think this is supposed to indicate that he's back home living with his mom like he's a child again. Cool little Easter egg. Back to the Clone Wars. Clone troopers in the background. Can't really tell if they're Phase 1 or Phase 2. I'm assuming Phase 2. Hard to tell, though, because they're so small and dark, but there you go. This Imperial turret from Andor might look familiar to you. This is an Imperial pillbox that was actually based on turret illustrations by Ralph McQuarrie. He did these for The Empire Strikes Back for the Battle of Hoth. And in some ways, the designs were actually used to create the Hoth turrets as well, but you can really see the striking resemblance here. What I think is funny is that in Empire Strikes Back, these turrets were actually designed for the Rebels. So they've been turned against them here because this is the Empire's turret. How good is it that they still use Ralph McQuarrie's designs though? They were that iconic, that unique, and set the tone visually of how Star Wars should feel and look. Still being used to this day, years after the man's death. It looks like Luthen has been adding to his antique collection. In episode 6 of Andor, we actually get to see more of what's inside his antique store. And one item stands out in particular that we've seen before, but only briefly in Revenge of the Sith. In the background here, these are Wookie combat shields. First seen used during the Battle of Kashyyyk in Revenge of the Sith. This man has artifacts from all over the galaxy, from all different eras also. I hope we get to spend more time in his antique store and get more Easter eggs here, and hopefully something more significant. Maybe Chewbacca will come by one of these at some stage. Who knows? I love Andor's attention to detail, and one thing the series seems to be particularly detailed about is its Imperials and the way they're represented. Take Colonel Pettigar, for example. Did you notice the badges on his chest are orange and red? Well, the orange indicates that he has an engineering background. There's actually an entire system of these Imperial badge ranks, and if you start paying attention to each one in the original films and also in Andor, you'll start noticing the different ranks and roles amongst the Imperials. Generally, it seems to be the more badges you have, the higher ranking you are, but different colors also denote different meanings. Did you guys notice there's a Gungan shield in Luthen's antique store? These are the same shields used by the Gungans in the Battle of Naboo in The Phantom Menace. My only question is, how did Luthen get his hands on one of these? There seems to be a lot of Clone Wars era related paraphernalia in this office. Notably, he's also selling a lot of Sith and Jedi artifacts, like he's got the holocrons, the World Between Worlds tablets. In an era where the Empire are literally oppressing everything the Jedi were about, him flaunting and selling these is a bit sus, don't you think? Especially the fact he's clearly one of the founding members of the rebellion. Does he really think it wise to be selling all of this stuff? I feel like it's almost asking for attention. The latest episode of Andor has yet another direct reference to Rogue One. This one, albeit, is a little bit more subtle. In the background, we can see the data vault, where the Empire store a lot of information about sectors, basically a giant room full of hard drives. And this actually looks really similar to the data vault in Rogue One, where Jyn and Cassian go to get the Death Star plans. You can see it in the background, it's kind of like this spiral tower, and it's not clear how tall this one is, because we never actually get to see inside the vault, but my guess is it's also quite a lot taller than what we can see through the glass window window here. I think this show has been so clever and subtle in referencing Rogue One. Hugely inspired by it and leading up to it, but also clearly paying homage to what came before. Did you know that the character giving the speech to the ISB in the latest episode of Andor is actually Ularen, the Admiral from the Clone Wars series, seen throughout so many episodes of the Clone Wars, leading the Clone Army, helping the Jedi. After Order 66 and the formation of the Galactic Empire, he joined the Empire, became this guy, and then was also actually in A New Hope, on the Death Star with Grand Moff Tarkin, Darth Vader, and also on the Death Star when it exploded. As far as I know, he didn't survive the explosion. In the latest episode of Andor, we were introduced to Tay Kolma, Mon Mothma's childhood friend. But did you know that his robes were actually modeled after Obi-Wan Kenobi's original robe, designed by Ralph McQuarrie all the way back in 1975? You can see the blue and white robes and shape of his costume in Ralph McQuarrie's original illustrations and sketches. This is one of those deep cut Star Wars references that Andor keeps delivering on. So many random tiny details in this show that you probably are going to miss. I just love the thought put into this. The idea of bringing these back. Hey, why not make this guy wear Obi-Wan's old robes? Amazing. Of everything in Luthen's antique store, this might be the strangest thing that he would own. The Jedi Temple Guard helmet. First of all, how does he have one of these? Second of all, would he really want to display this? Knowing that the Jedi once used these and any mention of Jedi is likely going to get you in trouble with the Empire. I know he has a Sith and Jedi Holocron as well, but this I feel like takes it a step further. Immediately also, this reminds us of Kanan Jarrus, possibly an Easter egg put in there for that purpose, for reminding us of Kanan. But I really want to know how he sources all of this stuff. The man is leading a double life. How does he have time to go hunting for a Jedi Temple Guard helmet? Did you know that the reason we saw clone troopers in the flashback sequence in Andor, where Clem is brutally killed on the street, is because this took place during the first year of the Empire. The Empire was still, of course, transitioning from clone troopers to stormtroopers, but already, right from the beginning, so much of the galaxy could see just how evil they were. Although Palpatine promised peace, justice, and security throughout the galaxy, his means of doing so were brutal, militaristic, totalitarian, cruel, and scary.
I have brought peace, freedom, justice, and security to my new empire.
There is an amazing but very subtle A New Hope reference in the latest episode of Andor. This happens during the interrogation scene. As Bix begins screaming, the blast door slides shut, and the camera pans down to an Imperial officer walking. We see his feet, his footsteps. This is a reference to the scene in which Leia is being interrogated in A New Hope. Darth Vader enters the room with the interrogation droid. The door slides shut, and the camera pans down to an Imperial engineer's footsteps as we see him walk down the hall. I just love how clear it is that the people making this show are huge, deep-cut Star Wars fans, but that it's also not blatantly obvious. They're intentionally being subtle about their references to Star Wars. They're not leaning super heavily into the nostalgia, which is something the Obi-Wan Kenobi series did. Instead, they're peppering in subtle references to pay homage to the original Star Wars films. So I was going to make a clip about this a few weeks ago, but never got around to it. There's a character that appeared a few episodes in Andor who we've actually seen before, and who plays a pretty significant role in Rogue One. Ruscott Melshi is one of the people in Andor's team of inmates in the Imperial prison, and you might have recognized his face. Melshi actually accompanied Andor in Rogue One on the Rogue One mission on Scarif to collect the Death Star plans, where he of course also perished. Everyone died. But this implies that Melshi and Andor are probably going to escape together. I really love how this series is bringing back so many actors we've seen before. Just like Mon Mothma was played by Genevieve O'Reilly in the Revenge of the Sith deleted scenes, Duncan Powell is reprising his role as Melshi here in Andor. This is the most random thing to show up in Andor. I swear every episode we get in Luthen's shop, he has new antiques that are Easter eggs to something else in Star Wars, and today we got another one, episode 10. For some reason, Luthen has Padme's headwear from her time in Attack of the Clones. I'm pretty sure this is when she returned to Naboo in Attack of the Clones, when she was escorted by Anakin. But what the heck? Why does he have this? The amount of stuff that has showed up in this guy's shop. He's had a few things from Naboo as well. He had the Gungan shield before, and now this. It's just like, dude, where are you getting all this stuff? Shouldn't this be on Naboo somewhere? Shouldn't this be kept in the family or with the royals, with the I don't know, someone other than you, man? You're pawning off all this stuff. I really want an explanation of where he gets this stuff and how he has the time to source so many random artifacts when he's busy running a rebellion on the side and trying to create an uprising. Luthen is clearly one crazy busy man. But there you go, guys. He's got this here too. What will we see next? Find out next time on Luthen's Antiques and Atrocities. Oh, wow. The prison in Andor is probably one of the most messed up things we've ever seen in Star Wars. And it turns out when Andor was originally being written, the ideas we see in this prison hadn't even been developed yet. Tony Gilroy, the show's creator, knew that he wanted a prison. However, it wasn't until he began working with the other writers on each individual script that they worked out how this prison was going to work. We asked very simple questions. Is there a way to get rid of the bars in a prison? How do you have a prison that doesn't have a ton of guards? If you don't want it to be dank and dirty and damp, it's the opposite. It's bright and white and antiseptic. What does that do to it? And then slowly the prison story emerged. Technically, I guess you'd also call this more of a labor camp than a prison, because each prisoner is being made to work under harsh conditions. And as the story went on, some of the more twisted ideas began, like the fact that they're literally competing against the other prison inmates just so they can have flavor in their food. I honestly think the prison arc of Andor was probably my favorite from the entire show, and I'm still hoping we see its aftermath in some respects. What happens beyond this, and what happened to this place after the show? Did you guys notice that Dr. Gorst's headset that's used to torture Bix actually looks really similar to Lobot's, Landor's assistant from Empire Strikes Back? Now that we've seen what this thing is capable of, this makes me wonder, is Lobot constantly being tortured? Is that the only reason he listens to Lando? Is he constantly hearing the death screams of the children of some poor alien race who have been oppressed by the Empire? Look into his eyes, see the pain, see the fear. Lobot is not who you think he is. Is Lando actually twisting his brain? Perhaps what Bix was using is an early model of what Lobot is wearing. I feel so sorry for Lobot after seeing this. The similarities are there. It's too close not to be true. The Ring of Kafrene might sound familiar to you. It was actually mentioned in the latest episode of Andor. Anto Krieger's missing pilot is said to be on his way to Kafrene. We actually saw the Ring of Kafrene in Rogue One. This is the first time we ever saw Cassian Andor. It's a floating asteroid-style city, which is possibly one of the most unique and yet dangerous locations in all of Star Wars. Look at this thing. It's just a floating asteroid in space, and there's a giant city here. How does that make sense? What if the asteroid crashes into another asteroid? What happens then? Whole city's gone. Clearly that can't happen because it would have taken years to build all this, but still, cool to see Andor is referencing Rogue One and expanding this galaxy even more. Originally, it was said that Andor hasn't used the Stagecraft technology, which was used to create shows like The Mandalorian, Obi-Wan, The Book of Boba Fett, the giant LED panels. Well, it turns out that's not entirely true. It was just revealed that Stagecraft was used, but in a more limited capacity. All of the windows in the Chandrilan Embassy, Mon Mothma's home on Coruscant, are LED screens revealing the world outside, the world of Coruscant. So this isn't CGI, this is actually in the shot, which brings the world of Coruscant to life, just outside each window. We just got an inside behind-the-scenes look at Narkina 5, the sinister prison we've seen in Andor. And a couple things that blew my mind are first, the scale of this place. Everything is real, the size of it, the size of the ceilings. This is a giant indoor set in a studio. And then also the fact that the tools and tables you see all the prisoners using are actually real.
Having to learn to use all of this machinery and the way that they've worked together. There are so many moving parts, and they have to work totally in sync, and they really do.
Everything is actually functional. The actors had to learn a sequence of putting these things together, moving parts, and making this thing look operational, because it actually is. A unique Star Wars ship just made an appearance in episode 11 of Andor. You guys might have recognized what's called the Quad Jumper, the ship Andor and Melshi are running to try and escape. Well, this ship actually made an appearance in The Force Awakens. This is the ship Rey and Finn are running towards, which gets completely blown up by the First Order. So instead they have to choose the Millennium Falcon. I like the comparison here. The Quad Jumper is clearly a very attractive choice of escape ship. Both sets of characters running towards it, and neither making it on their first attempt. Did you guys notice the highly symbolic moment right at the end of episode 11 of Andor? Just after Andor has learned the fate of his mother, that his mother has passed away, he looks off into the sunset over the water. And you might have felt some sense of familiarity with this shot. It's the same as one of the final shots in Rogue One, just before Andor dies. He is looking out over the water with Jyn Erso as the Death Star destroys most of Scarif, moments before his death. Now you might also remember earlier in the series, in episode 3, Andor also stared off into the distance into the light, as his new life was beginning. This was done in both the flashback scene, and also as he set out on his new journey with Luthen. Staring out over the water into the light is being used as a symbol to signify a new beginning. Whether that be a new life or a death, it's symbolic of the unknown, of what happens next. And it's so cool to see this visual imagery being used over and over again, tying these episodes together. The latest episode of Andor brought back an Imperial ship we've been seeing more of in recent times. The TIE Reaper could be seen right at the start of the episode on Narkina. This ship actually first appeared in Rogue One, but has since been seen in Fallen Order, and you could also fly this in Star Wars Squadrons. This ship's design was actually created by Doug Chiang, who's designed a lot of the starships for Star Wars in recent times. One of the most notable is Mandalorian ship, the N1 Naboo Starfighter, and in Rogue One these were used during the Battle of Scarif, designed as a dropship to deploy Death Troopers. You guys might have seen this ship before. This is a Cantwell-class Arresta cruiser, which we first saw in Solo, A Star Wars Story, and since then, it hasn't really made another appearance until Episode 11 of Andor. These ships were used by the Empire to, yep, you can guess it, arrest citizens and other ships they were suspicious of. That's why it had 3 giant tractor beams, one of which Luthen destroyed in this scene. But it's cool to see this ship, plus a bunch of other ships in Andor, making a comeback in Star Wars, like the Quad Jumper, like the TIE Reaper. But the Empire stuff, I think, is always so cool. Everything has such a specific purpose. Imagine that. They designed this ship just to arrest people. Clearly didn't work too well. There was one detail in episode 11 of Andor that got a lot of people talking. A lot of people arguing over what this could be. Luthen's pepper grinder. Some people speculated that it might be a lightsaber. Others are like, no, it's just the staff he had in the earlier episodes he was using as a walking stick. But a new Black Series figure might reveal what this actually is. It looks like a dagger, some kind of knife he carries around with him that possibly comes out of the pepper grinder shaped thing. I think this thing has more than one use though. I think it's kind of like a multi-gadgeted Swiss Army knife of pepper grinders, if we can mix those things together. I do hope that he can also use it to crack pepper. Perhaps he was a chef at one point, got annoyed working for the Empire or for whoever, and then has decided to form the rebellion, and that's why he still carries this with him. That's my theory. Did you guys notice that all the prison guards in Narkina 5 actually use DH-17 blaster pistols, which is the same model of blaster used by the prison guards in the Death Star in A New Hope? We see them in the scene where Luke, Han, and Chewie go to rescue Princess Leia, and I love these kind of subtle callbacks in Andor. This show has been so good at making subtle references to other Star Wars media, in particular the original films, but not doing it so blatantly, apart from Luthen's antique store, which has literally everything you could find from all across the galaxy, from Sith to Jedi holocrons to goodness knows what else. Wookie shields, Gungan shields, Naboo headwear, the list goes on! Andor just seems to keep going from one strength to the next. The show was just awarded with a Peabody Award, adding to the list of awards Andor has already received. But what's unique about this award is that it seems to be rewarding Andor for reflecting modern society. A note that came along with the award on the Peabody website says, honoring excellence in storytelling that reflects the social issues and the emerging voices of our day. Few other long-running franchises loom as large in today's contemporary pop culture imagination than Star Wars. Yet amid stories of destiny-driven heroes and doomed superpowered villains, Tony Gilroy's Andor tackles that familiar galaxy with an eye not just for spectacle, but for a keen-eyed commitment to what sci-fi and fantasy can do best, mirror our own mundane trials and tribulations, back with enough remove that their lessons become unavoidable. In a lot of ways, Andor is the most sci-fi of all recent Star Wars shows, because it's not about the spectacular, it's not about starships and flying in space with laser swords, and the mystical force and Jedi. It's about the people and the psychology of what's going on in the galaxy as a reflection of our modern world. Did you know that Andor was actually going to drop the first F-bomb ever in Star Wars until a last-minute decision was made to change and remove the F-bomb? In Marva's speech, the original script had her say, F the Empire, instead of fight the Empire.
The final line in Marva's speech was,
The Empire.
The Empire.
The Empire?
The Empire.
In the end, it was decided this was going too far for Star Wars. Andor was also the first Star Wars drop of the S-bomb.
Shit.
But who knows, maybe in Season 2 we'll get the F-bomb. Season 1 had S-bomb, Season 2, F-bomb. Let's bring it on. Star Wars is not for kids anymore. So Empire Magazine just released some behind-the-scenes footage from Andor Season 1. And in this clip, Diego Luna reveals that he decided not to rehearse with the rest of the cast during the Aldhani arc because he wanted all of them to bond and then for him to come in as an outsider, just as he does in the show.
I remember I was asked if I wanted to rehearse with them, and I said no, not really.
He said coming in to film these scenes with the rest of the cast, they already had dynamics that he wasn't aware of.
We were like a team, you know, like a theater troupe. I was an outsider to that.
It's small decisions like this that I think have made this show so much better. It's the fact the actors and the writers were willing to go to that extra effort to create more realism and try and make the series as believable as possible. When I talk about Andor with people, everyone says it's a good show outside of being a Star Wars show. You don't necessarily need to be a Star Wars fan to watch it, as Andor is just a good series on its own. It's a good story and it's told well.
There's one dark detail in the Andor Season 2 trailer that I think a lot of people probably missed. In the shots of Andor on Yavin 4, we can see him wearing the same shirt which he eventually dies wearing at the end of Rogue One. The events of Andor Season 2 are leading right up until moments before Rogue One begins. Andor is essentially a prequel to Rogue One, but I think this is really cool continuity tie-in from the art department, from the directors, from the show creators, that they're literally linking and making the characters wear the same clothes in which they end up meeting their ends in.
Your father would have been proud of you, Jin.
Know anything else about Andor? Let me know in the comments. Watch this video here for more Star Wars, subscribe, and
stay bombastic.